And once I learned what that felt like to really feel uh, cared for and have compassion by another person, I was able to do that for myself because a I had an example. And once I learned how to do that for myself, I knew that that was my gift to give to others.
Welcome to the Healing Cocoon. I'm Jacoby Gray, soul alignment and success coach and energy healer, which means I can intuit the subtle layers of your energy field to promote ultimate health and well-being. My goal for this podcast is to shed light on the healing journey itself and help you feel more supported as you embark on the process of unpacking your past to consciously create your present and start living the life of your dreams. Through the study of coaching, kinesiology, holographic kinetics, meditation, Reiki, the chakra system, and many other modalities, I've learned how to release the blocks that were holding me back. Now I'd love to help you do the same. By embarking on your own self-healing process, you'll see the world transforming around you in ways you never thought possible. You'll begin to experience more connection, clarity, love, fulfillment, synchronicity, and success than you've ever had before. So welcome to the Ascension. Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome back to the Healing Cocoon podcast for another week. Today we're speaking with Whitney Willison, who I met for the first time last October when I went on a retreat hosted by my friend Katie Tyner of Moonbody Soul. And if you scroll back to episode 11, you can hear when I interviewed her. And it was a truly magical coming together of women, this retreat. And Whitney's ethereal nature, integrity of service, and inspiring devotion to ceremony and ritual was a hugely contributing factor to that magic. I remember being blown away by all the ways she showed up for the retreaters through astrocartography, tea ceremony, holistic haircuts, an intention setting ritual, and I was immediately curious about who she was and how she came to be so accomplished in the depth of her practice across so many areas. So you'd better believe I asked her to come on the show. Whitney is an ethical entrepreneur, holistic hairstylist, Usui Reiki master, mother, and founder of Beauty. Guided by her passion for alternate modalities like Reiki, astrology, and sacred ritual, she developed Of Beauty, a community and education platform to share holistic philosophies and practices with other beauty professionals, with the intention to raise the consciousness of the beauty industry. Her calling is to bridge the worlds of healing and beauty through empowerment, radical releasing, and earth-centered rituals. Fueled by a passion for both conscious learning and unlearning, she regularly holds classes, workshops, women's circles, and Reiki shares. Whitney believes it is every being's divine right to know their own beauty and power, and to trust in their innate ability to heal and be their greatest resource, or be their own greatest resource. So settle in for a juicy chat about all things holistic and ritualistic, and share this episode with a friend who you feel would be inspired by Whitney too.
I don't think I'm alone in feeling like I was born during the wrong time, or maybe to like a family that didn't really understand, like feeling like kind of like the outcast from an early age. And I think emotionally and spiritually, I felt very different than my peers, than my family. I felt really misunderstood as a child. And I think that that creates its own trauma, feeling misunderstood repeatedly. And so, with any trauma, things start to build, and there gets to be a point where, you've just been hit with so many wave after wave after wave that you only have either like you either completely drown, right? Or you decide, I'm going to get myself out of here. And I didn't really have a lot of advocates at that, like as an early child. People didn't seem to really understand what I was going through, and because I felt so different, I actually felt the need to hide myself because I didn't want to be found out that I was different. But there came a point in my life, I was around 11 years old, where I knew that I needed support bigger than what I currently had in my support system. And so I actually sought out a therapeutic treatment center for myself to help with at the time, which was like, with all of the feeling misunderstood, I had like behavioral issues, and I guess I don't know if I want to say behavioral issues. I had coping mechanisms that I learned that were really unhealthy, such as like eating disorders and self-harm, and just ways in which I was dealing with my depression, which stemmed from not being heard or listened to as a child. So I was able to figure out how to support myself, which was finding professional help at a really young age. And
At
at
age
age
11.
11, I sought out, it's like kind of like a therapeutic boarding
Wow.
school for girls. And I said, this feels like a place I would feel nurtured and cared for, and that I could see myself like learning the lessons that I would need to be on my own and really be able to move through some of these psychological patterns and conditionings that I couldn't really like cope with anymore and didn't want to. And I knew at the time my family didn't have the tools, or they weren't well equipped emotionally enough to help me to get that.
Wow, this is a wisdom way beyond your years to have that kind of ability to observe your own situation and to not be so identified in your patterns that they perpetrated your entire sort of like teenage years before you even woke up. Like 11, that's so
Yeah,
young.
100%. I was definitely on the young side, especially within that peer group of other girls that were going through their own healing process. I was on the youngest side of that, but I knew within my being that I was already so much more mature. And so it was something that like I kind of saw as necessary. Like I had to do it in order to be a child again because I wasn't living life as a child up until age 11, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. And so where did you go from there? Did it take long to undo those patterns and programs of sort of not feeling seen and heard and then the resulting behaviors?
I think that time isn't really linear, and I think that it's such a um, something that I will always kind of return to in a way of like you even now you asking me this question, like I'm seeing it in a way that like, oh, that's still relevant. Like those lessons that like they still come up for me, or those core wounds will still resurface in other areas. So I always say our healing is never done. It's never like complete, but what happened was is that I did I did, and I was able to really fully understand the harm that I was creating and was able to like compartmentalize the ego from the self. And I learned that at a really early age. And that was what my therapist used to teach me so that I could separate the negative mind talk from our actual essence. And that's a tool I still use every day. And so it was something that I was able to repattern my thinking and create compassion for the self, which was eh, some people still at, whatever age in their 40s and 50s still don't cultivate that compassion. So it was something that I did learn, and I was very extremely grateful for the privilege and the ability to be able to go through that kind of therapy and understand that at an early age.
So, were you able to reconcile with your family at all once you'd gone through this experience? Did you find ways to communicate with them?
Absolutely. And I think that the support system of of that type of setting where there was personal therapy and family weekends and integrations. And then they were also, my parents and other family members were also encouraged to seek their own therapy outside of the program. So it was a time where, I think that there was an expectation like I was broken or, needed to be fixed or something. But really what happened was is that the way that I see it and the way that it was explained during that time was that it's a holistic family system. So it's not just one person of the unit that's broken. It's like we all need to recalibrate in order to heal. So there was a lot of focus on that as well. And it absolutely, we learned communication techniques and ways of learning to trust one another after so much trust had been broken. So there was a lot of healing that took place amongst myself and family members, and even across the board between outside family members as well. And yeah, I'm honestly, I feel that that was a huge, like you asked me where my healing journey started. It was definitely like that. That was the where all the lessons started to really come in, and where I think my soul like really needed to have that experience to be where I'm at now currently.
And let me just share with the listeners a little bit about when I met you on a retreat in October. I think on the first day I had an astrocartography reading with you, and that was amazing. And then that night we had the most incredible tea ceremony hosted by you, which was incredible. And then the next morning I walked out and you were just freestyle just cutting this person's hair so gloriously in nature, and I was like, who is this angel who can do all these things? And I feel like it's starting to. And then you host an intention setting, and I was like, wow, you have so many skills and such a wisdom and an ability to hold space in so many different ways. I was just hugely impressed. And I think I'm understanding now how you have this ability because you started so young on your awakening journey. So, how did you get from there to where you are now with this expression of so many beautiful skills to be able to connect with people?
Thank you so much for all those beautiful um, acknowledgments and compliments. I really appreciate hearing that. It's nice to be seen by another person. And I think that that's what really, well, as I'm saying that, I'm reflecting that it's nice to be seen by another person. That's what I really understood and got from that time when I wasn't understood and I was feeling so misaligned because I didn't feel like there was another person to recognize my soul or my beauty at that time, or what it was that to hold space for me. And once I learned what that felt like to really feel uh, cared for and have compassion by another person, I was able to do that for myself because I had an example. And once I learned how to do that for myself, I knew that that was my gift to give to others. Because when we don't have something, or when I don't have something, and you know what it feels like to have after being empty, like you want, if you see emptiness in others, you're like, oh, let me give you what I can give. So it's like this very like reciprocal cyclical sort of journey and in the healing process of like feeling lack and then feeling abundance. And when we're in abundance, like we want to share and give that abundance to others that have that lack. And that personal story, that personal gift, I think is being seen and holding space and really recognizing where I can give compassion to people who maybe aren't seeing the compassion in themselves.
That's so beautiful and feels really authentic. How did you get into, let's start with hair. How did you end up on the hair journey as a holistic hairdresser?
Well, that's a funny one. I just, I really just decided as a teenager to, I didn't want the commitment of going to college. And so I said, I'll go to a trade school for a year. And if I ever want to go to college, I can decide to on my own. And I kind of made that decision early on to just kind of hit the ground and start working versus I knew that if I were to maybe take my time of figuring out what I was going to do, there might be too many options for me and I might get lost in that. So I just found something that I like to do and I just started doing it. And I had all these, I had all these dreams about being an artist in that field. And I really accomplished them at an early age. And I kind of got I kind of keep doing this in my life, Jacoby, where I like have this wild dream of like what life is going to look like, and then we get to that dream and we're like, okay, what's next? And so I
Mm.
felt accomplished as an artist. I felt like, okay, what's next? Well, maybe working at a salon and like working behind the chair is what's next. So I left like the editorial fashion world and moved to like more one-on-one services, cutting and coloring. And from there, I became really sensitive to energy, actually. My like awakening was happening at the same time. I had like left a toxic fashion industry and I'm working in one-on-one energies and also in a salon environment that's not quite really healthy as well. So it was like learning how to um, protect my energy and my boundaries and my integrity within a world that felt really like opposing to how it is I wanted to live and work. And so navigating that was really challenging and not so fun. So I decided to leave and see clients from my home one on one. And from there, I began to play with how to receive clients and how like my customer experience or my client experience would be. And I started just adding in little things like aromatherapy and therapeutic touch and maybe curating the music, just like little things. And then all of a sudden, I became a mother and wow, that was a whole nother wave of awakening and sensitivity because all of a sudden I was like aware of toxicity on a on a complete another level where I was really worried
Mm.
about the cleaning products I'm using and all of these other things. And I think in a way like sensitivity breeds sensitivity. So if we start to like become more aware of our sensitivity actually grows. And so I don't
Mm.
necessarily know that that's a good thing, but for me, it
It's the way it
is
works,
the
though,
way it
isn't it?
works.
I think once you start the journey, there's you can't get off the train once
No,
it leaves the station.
absolutely not. It's like it just starts to infiltrate everything. And um, so I
Mm.
became really curious actually, and I started swapping out like chemicals for gentler ingredients, and then I started noticing my body when I was doing hair and I was doing color, how I was not feeling great. I would start to get like a little tickle in the back of my throat. I was getting headaches. I was feeling tired all the time. And I realized on days that I wasn't working with color, I had more energy. So that was another one that I swapped out. I researched different companies and I found a much cleaner color so that I could color line so that I could continue with my work and eventually I had to say no to all chemicals and I stopped coloring and strictly just became a hair cutter, which I never anticipated. I always thought I wanted to do it all. But my body and my health and
Hmm.
what also was coming into my home at the end or being around my child, it was just a very black and white answer for me. And
Yeah.
during that time, I had also started, I guess before I had my baby, I had started my journey with Reiki. And so that was like kind of happening along along this whole journey of motherhood and cleaning out my home and kind of like replacing toxic items for more gentle, like a more gentle, holistic approach. I was also just attuning myself and going through a training program of like learning how to work with energy. And so it all kind of happened all together as it always does.
Mm. Wow. And so as the Reiki skills and the sensitivities were sort of awakening, you were cutting out toxins and things like that more and more until you got to a really clean, clear, holistic place of just
hmm
cutting. And was that when you started to investigate all of these other realms like tea ceremonies and astrocartography? And is that sort of when you started going into other things?
Well, it's actually all kind of been happening for a long time. Like when I had just first started, I just first started life as a hairdresser. Way before that is when I happened upon my first tea ceremony. It was actually at a music festival, which is like, quite surprising. Yeah.
Wow. That is the most unusual place for a tea
Yeah, and
ceremony.
it was absolutely needed. And it was something that was really beautiful and surprising, but I recognized when I sat down and it it wasn't as a quiet, tea ceremony like the one that you and I sat together in Bonnie Doon, but it was still done with such heart and with such intention. And it was a
Mm,
moment where this like chaotic, beautiful, vibrant, alive music festival where there was this like very peaceful stillness, like sweet sweetness of like the tea medicine being shared, amongst party goers, right? It was like a very
mm.
more elevated form of consciousness that was able to be transmitted. And I really understood that on a micro macro level.
I'm going to jump in here for a sec to talk to you about my all time favorite skincare product, Osea's Sea Serum. Because when I first discovered the benefits of hyaluronic acid a few years ago, I fell madly in love with it and I went on a hunt to find the perfect formula. Most of them, although they worked, they left my face with a kind of tacky, sticky feeling that turned into a big shiny mess after I put on moisturizer and foundation. But then I stumbled across Osea's Sea Serum and I couldn't believe how easily it settled into my skin without making me look like a disco ball by the end of the day. Osea's newly upgraded formula contains two powerful types of hyaluronic acid, plus Japanese miru seaweed, which replenishes and balances the skin's natural moisture level, volcanic marine ferment to plump and smooth out those fine lines, and snow mushroom to form a hydration layer on the skin which seals in all the moisture. And not only that, and this is the reason I'm so happy to stand behind this company, Osea is also vegan, cruelty free, climate neutral, and they've just become ocean positive, which for me, being an Aussie growing up in the ocean, is a truly meaningful, high integrity company ethos that I'm excited to support. So, if you would like to try this awesome hyaluronic sea serum and support a certified ethical company in the process, you can use my discount code UA10, so that's Urban Ascension 10, UA10, to receive 10% off when you go to Osea's website, and that's spelt OSEA. It'll change your life. Well, your skin's life anyway. It certainly did mine.
As soon as I got home, I went to Chinatown in downtown Los Angeles and I got myself a tea set and some tea and just
Mm,
practiced on my own. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was playing and understanding, okay, there's a form of art here and there's a form of ritual, and I understood the sacredness of not just making tea with a tea bag, right? But like creating some sort of
mm,
ceremony around it. And so I wasn't professionally trained at I was just playing, and but that sort of informed my practice of sitting with tea and just observing the self and having some moments of stillness and moments of ritual. And from there, my tea practice evolved into about 5 years later, I sat in a bowl tea ceremony for the first time. And that was um, a formal experience of being still with oneself and collectively sitting in a field where we're together observing this very beautiful dance and beautiful um, presentation of honoring something which is really sacred, and then that reflection of honoring um, the stillness and the time, and of sitting and reflecting with oneself
Mm.
in a communal space. And
Mm.
that's where I really completely was like, oh wow, this is something completely different than what I have been experiencing and playing with before. And so that's where my journey, and like there was like an invocation or like a spark of like, okay, how do I learn more about this particular practice, and how do I begin to incorporate it into the practice that I've previously had.
And that's where everything got elevated, I guess.
Yeah.
Could you just explain what a tea ceremony is? For someone listening, they might be like, what is a tea
Hmm.
ceremony?
Well, I think it's really wise to just define what is a ceremony. And
Hmm.
a ceremony to me is different than, let's say, a ritual. A ritual is something that we could do every day. And within the ceremony, there is a ritual, but a ceremony is really a celebration and an honoring. And I think that that's where those words differ a little bit. And with a ceremony, I believe that there's a beginning and an end. There's like a complete container for what is magic that comes out. You can't really create the magic itself, but you can create the container for the magic to arise. And so that's what a ceremony to me is something is like this container of magic in that's created out of this desire to celebrate or to honor. And so a tea ceremony to me is about honoring tea itself and honoring time and space and whatever it is that you're celebrating, whether it be a birthday or a wedding or that morning or a visit with a friend, right?
Mm.
It can be whatever it is that you're celebrating, but there's an occasion that's happening, and the celebration is the moment. And so there's many different like parts of ritual within the tea ceremony, and depending on the lineage and depending on even if you're, practicing a specific type of lineage, it can be different things. But all in all, I think that what it comes down to is having having a moment in time to really be with oneself and be with the tea and learn to listen to what that moment and what that tea leaf that you're partaking with has to teach you.
That is such a beautiful explanation. I love how you defined ceremony first. That was really, really beautiful. Thank you. So, because you have so many things I want to talk about as much as
Sure,
possible, can we move on to
absolutely.
astrocartography? um, First of all, I'm not sure some people might not even know what
Mhm.
astrocartography is. So, just a little explanation in terms of astrologically what astrocartography is.
So, astrocartography is that this is funny how I'm like, how does it want to come out? The explanation. I'm
Yeah.
like, it's really about your astrology, and so every person has a birth chart based on the time that they are born, and astrocartography is taking um, the birth chart and the birth data and creating a system of like relation or correlation between latitude and longitude and the way that the planets and like where those certain like markers in time were, um, how they influence the earth and where you were born, then creates this sort of map. Um, a map that can look like wavy lines and straight lines all across the globe. But for instance, each planet and sign that you're born under has um, its own rhythm on the actual map. So every person's map is completely individual, just like everyone's birth chart, and they're completely related.
I love how when I had my reading and you sat me down and you pulled up the, I don't know, I guess the program on the computer, and then it was just all these colored lines running across the earth with my planets. And I was like, okay, what does all this mean? It was so exciting. And I remember in one particular place, I mean, luckily for me, I was born in a place that was very powerful, which was sort of Newcastle in the east coast of Australia. I had a lot of energy running through there. And somewhere else I had a lot of energy was the New York area, like greater New York as well as the city. And you were talking about the different percentages of in say romance or family life or career. And so how does it work with those percentages in different places?
So the way that I like to use it is that, for instance, I'm going to make a metaphor. We live in a city, or I live in a city, and I have many different options of places I can go so I can receive different energies from that place. If I want to study and do some research. I might go to the library. I might go to a place where it feels quiet. If I want to be inspired by nature, I might go on a walk or a hike. If I want to be social and meet people, I might go out to a party or a yoga event where I'm going to run into other people that I might want to interact with. And I think that that's kind of how I look at these maps as like, but it's much more broader, of course, because it's spanning across the whole world. So we look at different lines like romantic lines or lines under Mercury. If you're like a public speaker, that might be a really great place for you to activate that sort of energy. So it's kind of like you get to choose your own adventure. What energies do you want to activate? And do you have access or the ability to, or even the want and the desire to maybe travel or move to a place that's going to activate different parts of your chart and help to either like bring up things you want to um, like I guess be more influenced by, or even in the sense of like maybe move through some things that might be difficult in your journey that you might want to like fast track your way through a healing, or something that you feel is maybe like under influenced that you want to bring up and like let shine a little bit more.
So um, have you ever made decisions about where you're going to go on a vacation or even where you're going to live according to your own astrocartography?
I don't know that I've made like, well, actually, yes, okay. I would say no, but then it's funny because everything kind of is this like circular, like I'm revisiting it now and asking if it's true or not. So I knew that I was living in LA for over 11 years, and for me, LA is a Pluto line, and I wanted to move off of it. I was like, okay, I'm done with Pluto energy. I want to see what's new. So that's my, I guess, my answer.
What's Pluto
Well,
energy?
my Pluto
Pluto
energy
energy is
is Scorpio in the eighth house. So for me, that was just like that's. living in LA, that comes up a lot for me, the like scorpionic transformation and kind of like more secretive tendencies. And eighth house is like sex, death, and money. And so it's like a lot of like how, and it's also like the Pluto is a generational. So a lot of people within the generation of Scorpio and Pluto were dealing a lot with like societal views on sex, death, and money is like kind of an overarching theme. And so it's just definitely confronting in those areas for me. And I wanted to move off of it to see if I would get a little relief.
11 years of constantly going through the Scorpio process of rebirthing yourself could be
Correct.
exhausting.
Yeah, that rebirth is a key term. So it's like we're in constant like revolution. I wouldn't say evolution, revolution of of
Yeah.
that rebirth. I'm like, oh, I'm kind of done with
Yeah.
the transformation for a minute. Let's just see what else is out there. And I've definitely noticed two places that were my Mercury goes through Hawaii and also through Singapore. And those two places I've only spent brief amounts of time, but the amount of ability within conversation and being in the public eye, speaking. I am not a big stories person on Instagram or a big live person, but for whatever reason, when I was there, I was like in front of the camera, talking, sharing, like a completely different person. I'm like, well, this is a quite a different activation that I'm feeling. And I've only actually traveled to places so far that have been like really positive aspects. So I don't have a lot of negative things to say about astrocartography other than my Pluto experience that now I'm back in LA and I'm living here and how to I'm learning how to utilize my Pluto placements to be more beneficial for me versus like competing with them. So that's kind of I'm learning like how to like accept and not just being like, oh, it's Pluto is the problem, but like how can I like reframe
Yeah.
how I'm interacting with those energies within myself and what's coming up and how I can like use them to my benefit.
Yeah. So it sounds like all of these things that you're doing are tools for understanding yourself, finding deeper presence with yourself in every moment, learning how to be with the more difficult times and not not judging yourself or not reacting to them, which would be a consistent challenge, I imagine, in LA if your Pluto line is constantly
I'm
activating there.
curious.
But all of
Oh,
these tools,
sorry, I
yeah,
wanted to interrupt you. I'm curious
yeah.
how you feel about going back to Australia after your astrocartography reading, if that like shifted or influenced you in any way.
Yeah, it's really interesting because because I've built my business here, it means I need to maintain my green card. So if I was to actually make that move permanently back to Australia, it would kind of mean letting go of my green card, kind of like, shifting my business into an Australian based business. And so there's a lot there to think about in terms of making that permanent shift. But after I learned that information, it did. Because I think I had such a high percentage in the different percentages in family, friends, romance, all of the things, career. And to be honest, my life in Australia was so full, just friends upon friends upon friends, and always a boyfriend or a husband, or there was always love and romance around me. Career, whatever it was, like you, I'm very much like I'll get interested in something and I'll head off in that direction, and it always seemed to unfold for me quite easily. And it wasn't until the reading and I was like, oh, I wonder if Australia was like, I just thought that was life because my life had always been
Hmm.
that way. And then coming to America where I don't have as much of these energies or these high percentages in the different areas, there hasn't been as much romance. And career hasn't been, while it's, it's all worked, it hasn't had that same kind of energy as it did when I was down under. And so it was really interesting for me just to even hear and understand that and go, oh, I wonder if it is actually my astrocartography, that Australia is a really sort of supportive, energetic place for me to be. And that's why whatever it was that I was doing in my life was always really supported, and kind of blossomed.
Mm, absolutely. I can totally relate.
Mm.
Yeah. That's when you said you just thought your life was always like this. That's exactly how I felt when I left my Pluto line. And I I landed in my Neptune line, and it was a complete different mindset shift and energy shift. And it was a really nice thing to know that that I think that let me just jump in and say that I think that it's really nice to understand the energies that you're working with so that you can understand like how much is you and how much is environment, and then also understanding how to
Mm.
work within that environment so that it can best suit you. Like coming back to my Pluto line after realizing what life is like outside of it, I can more so utilize the energies because I know what to look for. Like I know what, like when it's showing up for me, I can see it as something to work through versus as something that's and versus something that's like out of my control in a way. And I also feel that
Mm.
we can always travel or move or like we can, I mean not always and not all of us, but what I do mean to say is that we have like a lot of us have the privilege to take a vacation or to like move or to go see family or to be in a different energy. And some of us may have
Mm.
lines really close together, so it might be a lot more simple than we make it out to be, and not to bypass and just say like, oh, it's okay to just like,
Mm.
move if something's not feeling right. But it is nice to understand how much being in a different alignment or being in a different energy, how that can, how much important and how much
Yeah,
impact
impact
it
you
can
or
be,
support
yeah,
you.
on you.
Mm.
100%. Yeah.
Mm.
And to know that life can be completely different.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't think I'd ever thought of it like that. I mean, I knew that places had energy because whenever I'm in LA, I love that city, but I too go through some kind of like personal transformation every time I'm there without fail. I'll arrive there and I'll be all sort of like bright energetically, and then I go through some kind of some all this stuff will come up. It's just a really intense place for me energetically. And after a while I realized it's like, oh, every time I go back to LA, it's like I get thrown into the washing machine and I have to deal with all these things emotionally, and then I come out. And then when I leave LA, I'm like, oh, I can breathe here. And so I did understand that places had energy, but I'd never actually connected the fact that astrologically some places are directly impacting me more so than other people. I just knew that LA was a city that pretty much impacts everybody when they're there.
100%. I think that has a lot to do with like how different people respond differently to things. Like one person might love it and like be like really social, and the next person might be, super introverted and needing like, a lot of alone time, or like their, business is great, or like
Mm.
other people are like, wow, they're like they really can't keep, can't get a grasp on their financial stability. And so sometimes it really does come down to like working with your chart and allowing for positive aspects to influence your environment.
And so, if anybody listening to this wanted to get a reading with you, how do they find you?
Well, right now you can email me and we can link
Mm-hmm.
that in the notes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And um,
Okay, amazing.
yeah, I would also say that if anyone is listening, that they can go and do their own reading. It's a little bit more challenging to decipher, but I would obviously like share that information with your listeners because it is quite
Mm.
fun um, to just plug in your birth data if you have it and to see. And that's astroclicktravel.com, which is, it's not as comprehensive and as much of the information as like my personal software. It's a software thing. So there's like a free version, which gives you like a condensed way to look at things and kind of gives you some rough guidelines. But um, really getting like a full reading can be like really life altering because you can like really specifically look at different places and understand and have things kind of mapped out for you, so to speak.
That's so cool. Yeah, I'd always wanted to get it done. I'm really glad that when I decided to do Katie's retreat and then she was like, "Oh, do you want to get a reading?" And I was like, "Yes, absolutely. I've wanted to do this my whole life."
Mm. Yeah, it was really, really great getting to know you and everybody there through the, I mean, it's a self-discovery tool, so it's, it's good to have that information
Mm.
about you, and I learned so much about you and was so happy to connect to you during that time as well.
Hmm. Thank
Mm.
you. So, what does a day in the life of Whitney look like when you have so many things that where you could be spending your time and
Mm.
energy? How do you flow and choose to balance amongst all these gifts that you have and can bring to the world?
Hmm. Well, lately there hasn't been a lot of consistency. I will say, be the first to admit and say that. And in the in the inconsistency, there still is consistency, of course. Like I think I've gotten a lot better as I've gone older at like um, moving along with the unknown. And so something that I
Mm.
have been practicing since 2020 is not really having a clear idea of what's next, but really like grounding into my center. So on a perfect day, I am waking up and having a morning practice, mostly in silence with myself, and that can range from 5 minutes to an hour. And I'd like to say that I'm more and more consistent with that as the days go by. And currently, right
Mm-hmm.
now, I've stopped doing hair actually, and I am working on an educational platform for beauty professionals to learn how to be more holistic in their practice. And so I have been giving a lot of my time and attention to that during my days. So when you ask me what does my day look like, it's usually some sort of personal practice and then working into building this educational platform. And I also just really
Mm-hmm.
like to um, honestly, I like to relax a lot. I'm like learning more and more that I like to say no. And I'm like, I'm the one that like
I love that you can admit that and that you're like, you know what, I love to say no.
it's become something that I'm like learning and kind of actually appreciating because I used to make all these promises like, yeah, I'm gonna meet you out or yeah, and then I would feel bad about like canceling, but now I'm just like
Mm,
really trying to commit to commit to things that I absolutely 100% will commit to. Otherwise, I'm just like, I have no energy for that. I'm tired. I see myself in bed at like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock tonight. So that's kind of like my trajectory these
yeah.
days is just taking it easy and giving myself as much time and space as I can to just enjoy the time and space. And yeah, yeah.
That's really beautiful. And I think to bring it full circle, that your awakening that you had when you were 11 and you had this wisdom to guide or allow yourself to be guided to
Mm,
this center that provided a space for you to be seen and heard. And now at this point in your life where you're fully standing in your self-worth enough to let yourself just
mm-hmm.
rest and be, because I think that that is the epidemic of our society, because we're not allowed to stop. We have to keep going, going, achieving, achieving, achieving. There's always this more, 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 and I've got to be better, better, better. And underneath it is this sense of not feeling like we're enough or good enough. And I think that the person who truly allows themselves to rest and just be with themselves is the person who has achieved peace and a healthy sense of self-worth.
Hmm. I have one thing to say on that is that in starting
Sure.
this new company, I've had such a like there isn't really a framework to be an entrepreneur that I've understood in the feminine way. It's very masculine. You need to work 8 hours a day, like have an organized schedule, like compartmentalize your day, have it all structured. And while that can be really good and very um, mm, I don't know, just like it can be helpful to have structure. But what I've been finding is like the days that I feel guilty for resting and then like just allow myself to like not have the guilt and just be like, okay, you know what? Today is a day that I'm gonna just need to like not force myself to work. Those are the days that like everything gets done and then some, or like this grand idea that I wasn't even thinking of all of a sudden comes and it's like I actually needed that space to not force myself on the hamster wheel. And that's where like I'm learning, I'm really, really learning in this like new form of work that I'm starting out in to completely have a different way of working and allowing things to be built versus like the old kind of patriarchal way of thinking. So that's been something that like when you said that's like the epidemic of society, I like completely relate. And I think rest and space is so important. And in a way, that's why tea is such a beautiful ritual for me. Why I really like to practice most days and whenever I can is because just like creating that, 30 minutes to an hour of stillness and silence to just be with your own thoughts and to be with the tea, there's so much space for magic to occur that gets carried on throughout the day and just propels me in ways that I don't actually really have to do the heavy lifting because like I'm already lifted, if that makes sense.
I hope this episode has inspired you to keep going on what can sometimes be a tough road to inner peace and true happiness. If you want to dive deeper into what we talked about today, go to thehealingcocoon.co for show notes and all things personal growth. And don't forget, if you're loving The Healing Cocoon, then put that love into action and subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcasts. And until next time, my friends, let's rise and shine together.